Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Up Close with Park City candidates. This morning we have Diego Zagara with us, and we're going to be talking to him about some questions that we have to follow up on last week's forum, as well as just some ideas of questions that our members would be interested in hearing. This is one of 5 candidate-focused conversations we're hosting for the 2025 mayoral and council elections. The sessions are hosted by Citizens Climate Lobby, the Proactive Alliance, and the Wasatch Back chapter of the League of Women Voters. Each candidate is going to respond to 6 questions. 3 of those questions we've shared in advance, and then we'll have 3 on-the-spot questions tailored specifically to the candidate. We have 3 moderators for each session. 2 will ask questions, and 1 will be the timekeeper. Each question will have about 2 minutes to discuss, and then we'll move on to the next question. I'm Susan Odell. I'm with the Proactive Alliance, and I'll be the timekeeper. Tracy Harden is with Citizens Climate Lobby, and she'll be asking some of the questions. And Corey Shadrick is with Proactive Alliance as well, and she will be asking the remainder of the questions. For the next 20 minutes or so, we'll be speaking with Diego Zagara. Diego is running for one of the 2 open seats on City Council. So let's get started and welcome Diego, and we'll jump on into the questions.
Great, thanks for having me.
Good morning, Diego. Park City's 2030 goals target reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from major sources like transportation, buildings, landfills, and more. What specific policies or initiatives would you champion to accelerate our progress towards these sustainability targets?
Absolutely. So, yes, it feels like we have deprioritized our focus on climate, sustainability, and environmental initiatives. Conversely, at the foundation, we started a zero food waste effort with a long-term goal of having food and yard waste being diverted from the landfill, understanding that it's a county-wide service, but sometimes a nonprofit organization like the foundation has a role to kickstart something and get it going. I see likewise the role of the city in examining ordinances and policies that could help. There's a couple of ideas that have intrigued me, including an ordinance that could encourage local businesses and vendors to divert food waste, and also examine the role that we can play as a city and as philanthropy as well to support that change and transition as we look to increase the life of our landfill. The other idea that I'm intrigued by is water conservation. It has to do with water conservation and specifically incentivizing folks to have smaller lawns. I know that can be sacrosanct in some parts of town, but it's one of these things that I see as inevitable as climate change continues. We ought to be investing in those policies that make it so that it's harder to have big lawns and actually incentivize people to reduce their water consumption. I've heard of some municipalities that have enacted policies around no new lawns. If you have a lawn, we love it, keep it. If you can make it smaller, great. There currently are incentives for xeriscaping, financial incentives for someone to xeriscape a certain amount of dollars per square foot. I would love to see that potentially increased and making it harder for a new development to put more lawn down, but instead look at wild species, natural local species to invest in, as well as xeriscaping. So got it. Thanks, Susan.
Awesome. Thank you, Diego. So our second question, public trust in government is essential to a healthy democracy. What specifically would you do to strengthen each of these areas? Transparency in decision-making, civic participation, and residents' confidence in city leadership.
All right. So let's start with transparency. And I think about it in terms of making ourselves available to the public. Having pre-conversations before an agenda item comes, both with staff and constituents, to make sure that we are representing the people that put us in office well. Of course, I'm going to have an opinion. Of course, I'm going to have a position on something, but I think helping it be informed by those who elected me would be critical. I love what council and the mayor currently do around, is it council in the neighborhood, mayor in the neighborhood, where we go out and it's not just waiting for people to come and share information. The open houses the city does is something I would continue to do it. And this, I'm bleeding now into civic participation too, because what I've learned, and this comes from my own experience, the first time I ever walked into council chambers, the meeting was underway, and you walk in through this door at Marsac City Hall, and you're in the middle of the room, and there's people on your left and there's people on your right, and they're all staring at you, and it's unclear on how to go about it, where to go, and the fact that you can give public comment for items that aren't on the agenda. Not every agenda item is slated for public comment. I had to learn that the hard way, actually. So I got up and gave comment about something that was on the agenda later. A sort of orientation for community members that are interested in participating. And the other thing is a warm handoff, a personal invitation for people to come. So I think that the combination of transparency, intentional outreach, especially with people that have not always been involved in community issues, and lowering the bar to accessing or giving public comment, though between those two things, I think we can increase the confidence that people have in our leaders right now.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Diego, next question. How do you plan to address housing affordability? And what role should short-term rental regulation play in maintaining housing stock for permanent residents?
Yeah. So we are unfortunately not the only ski town that has suffered from this. And there are towns that have been somewhat more effective at mitigating the impacts of nightly rentals. I think that some common sense nightly rental regulation makes a lot of sense. Um, I hear that even the state legislature might be interested in enacting something along these lines because it has hurt more towns across the state than we are aware of. And for me, if we want to keep a vibrant community, housing is one of the most important things we ought to invest in. It's one of the pillars of this campaign. It's one of the areas that I've talked about the most, probably. Um, we have about 12% of our workforce that gets to live and work in town, and we are lagging behind many other ski towns. And I get it. This is a remarkable place. We live in paradise and a very desirable place to live. I I don't think we're going to ever address the problem for everyone, but are there opportunities for us to look at starting to get some of our teachers that have slowly but surely moved away, some of our firefighters, law enforcement, service industry, nonprofit folks to get to live and work in this town? I think there's some projects that make a lot of sense in the short run. Holiday Village Parkside or HOPA is one of those that I'm interested in seeing move forward and quickly. It's staggered because 3 rounds of low income housing tax credits have failed, and that's unfortunate. But to me, that's a project that makes a lot of sense. Um, if you look at Old Town these days, I live in Old Town. I don't have a lot of neighbors, and Old Town has suffered from Airbnbs and a lot of nightly rentals. I want to be preemptive and proactive in thinking about how to protect our neighborhoods like Prospector and like Park Meadows so that that happens there less in the future.
Thank you, Diego.
Thanks, Diego. Okay, those were the 3 questions that Diego had in advance, and we're going to ask 3 candidate-specific questions now.
So Diego, you mentioned last week at the forum that was held at Jim Santee that there's a need to have political will to move projects forward. What does building political will mean to you, and how do you plan to do that as a new member of council?
Yeah, and I'm going to ask this from you 3, but also everyone watching, and it's hold us accountable. When we're in office, the election ends in November, happens on November 4th, and what we see is some disengagement afterwards. I want to make sure that we continue to engage people over the next 4, 8, however many years I'm lucky to serve in office, But for me, political will means voting projects forward that may not be perfect. They may be 90% there, but pretty good. And oftentimes projects have been stalled with this idea that we got to be thoughtful and strategic. It's not that we haven't been thoughtful and strategic before. It's just that not everybody in our community wants this to happen. And I don't recall seeing many projects or initiatives or um, policies that have 100% support. Sometimes there might be 3-2 votes. Sometimes 51% of the room might be saying one thing and 49 might be saying a different thing. And kicking the can down the road because it's a hard decision is not a good idea for me, and it's not a way in which I want to lead. I think that even if it's a hard decision, we should be prompted to make those decisions. I find that obstructionism is a new no. And what I'm understanding from our community members is that they're tired of seeing things stall and not move forward. They want to be thoughtful in and have a say in our own destiny versus letting things just happen to us, like Dakota Pacific, for example. And I recognize that's outside city limits, but it's a project that came down essentially from the legislature without a lot of say at this point. But yeah, I want to make sure that we're making the decisions even if they're hard, and even if they are controversial, so long as they're good for our community and good for the majority of people, I'll stand by those decisions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Diego. Diego, a rather scathing letter to the editor was recently written about your alleged mismanagement of Kings Crown HOA as a board member. What's your response to this?
Yeah, sure. It's a board of 3, first of all, and I've served on my time in this community about 10 boards or so. Um, I'd recommend almost all of them except for maybe being on an HOA board. What I'll say is that, and I think folks understand the difficulties. Somebody described it to me before I joined as one of Dante's circles of hell, and I didn't understand what they meant. But look, we are a small community here, 15 units, and we got to work together. There's there seems to be also, much to my point prior, it's hard to get 100% consensus on anything. I'm going to say that 12 of the units here are pretty aligned in what needs to happen in our building and our HOA management, and 2 or 3 may not. One of the other things I'll say is it's worth considering the source, and I'll call it what it is. This was political attack. One of the authors works as a general manager at Flanagan's for former candidate John Kenworthy. The other gentleman, tried to do nightly. Speaking of nightly rentals, tried to do nightly rentals here a few years back. The board shut him down. I'm not sure he's been entirely happy since. Could the 3 of us be? Are we the best HOA board members in the history? No, of course not. But things are. I think things were blown out of proportion, and the timing was curious. Again, with the election coming, I think there were some motivations to find holes in our service, and I'm proud of what we've done for our building, and I think that time will tell, the truth will come out, and I'm not too worried. I think people saw through the letter for what it was, and I feel good about what we've done here as an HOA board.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Never easy being on an HOA board. So question 6, our last question. So the need for affordable housing seems to be a consistent theme for many mountain town communities. We've touched on this a bit already. Does this need for less traffic, more open space, and less strain on our natural resources? It's important all of that happens. Knowing that affordable housing is a high priority for you, how do you propose we balance all of these factors?
Yeah. So when I think of affordable housing, like the building I'm in, like Engine House, the idea that it's on transit and near services is important for me. Some level of density, what we're seeing 3 stories, for example, parts of Engine House 4 stories, is also key. I think we got to be savvy about where we look to develop, and not every area is ripe for development. I'm also very conscious of sprawl. I'm concerned about Richardson Flat, the Larry H. Miller Group ownership of that, and their commercial interest. I understand why there's commercial interest there. And also, I understand there's a conservation easement that protects that land from being developed. I'm interested in keeping like boundaries to our town. I think it provides a sense of identity, whereas you look at Salt Lake Valley, there used to be independent towns, Holiday, Mill Creek, and now they're all touching essentially. And it's hard to tell when you're moving from one to another. I think there's an opportunity for us to preserve a sense of community and be intentional about where we build affordable housing. Holiday Village Parkside is a perfect example of a great location on transit that will have a positive impact on traffic. These folks are already coming into town. They're driving in each morning, 224 and 248, and clogging those arteries. If were they to live closer to the centers of employment, I believe there'd be less of a traffic impact, and especially when they are on transit lines. So Engine House, Holiday Village, Parkside, whatever ends up happening at the 5-acre parcel, in my estimation, should have some degree of housing as well, because it's great. It's an area that's medium density already. So those are the projects I would look at, the kind of project I would look at continuing to invest in for us to have a semblance of a community, neighbors, and workforce. I'm concerned about the declining numbers of the school district. I'm concerned about the percentage of people that get to live in this town and work in this town at 12%. So, yeah.
Thank you.
All right, Diego, thanks so much for your time today and for answering our questions. And now we'd like to just give you 2 minutes to wrap things up and tell the voters what you'd like them to know about you before the election.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been in Park City for the last 16 years. I was born and raised in Peru. I'm an immigrant. I've been a US citizen for the last 8 years. And with that, for me, comes a large degree of responsibility. I have a stake in this community in such a visceral and personal way. This is home now for me. And for the last 16 years, I've been able to work shoulder to shoulder with our workforce, with families, with people that make this town run. And I want to represent those voices in addition to the rest of the community. I worked at the Community Foundation for the last 9 years. I've gotten to know how generous this town is, how compassionate this town is, and how brilliant members of our community are, starting efforts like the Proactive Alliance to get involved and fight for our values, fight for what we care about. I am I pledge to run with to always stand by my values. That's what you always get. Um, I'm not saying I'm here to solve all the challenges the community has. If somebody says that, just be wary. Um, what I'm sharing is that I'm going to be a voice for locals. I plan on representing the entire community with a keen eye on those groups that haven't always been represented. And I want folks to hold me accountable to that. So I'm interested in running for council because I see a lot of opportunity at the local level as well, especially for the next few years. So that's where I'll leave.